20-year-old illegal alien attending a Maryland high school is accused of raping an 11-year-old girl. Gee, didn't all that elementary school sex ed teach the little complainer how to say no in Spanish? I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is another episode of The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only show that brings you scary and stupid stories like this about education and the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we're talking about a 7-year-old boy who was interrogated by police officers after being falsely accused of bringing a gun to school. Plus, disturbing new video shows a terrified 6-year-old girl being arrested and perp-walked to a police car after throwing a temper tantrum in her first grade classroom. But we start in Maryland, where a 20-year-old illegal alien, what's wrong with that sentence? Every word, 20-year-old illegal alien is in a public high school, and he turns around and rapes an 11-year-old girl.
Yeah, this story is actually coming out of two different Montgomery County, Maryland high schools. It involves Jonathan Correas Salamanca, who is 20 years old, and Ivan Reyes Lopez, who is 19. And they were each arrested, again, in two different schools for raping two 11-year-old girls outside the school. So Correas Salamanca attends Montgomery Blair High School in Silver Spring, and he's accused of having multiple sexual encounters with an 11-year-old after the victim's father found salacious text messages on her phone. And ICE has lodged a detainer on Correas Salamanca, and he's an illegal alien from El Salvador.
Gee, I wonder if Maryland's going to is going to cooperate with the cops here. Two 11-year-old girls, I mean, what rights do they have? Who really has more rights in this circumstance? A poor illegal kid's not quite 21 yet, in an American high school with all that racism and sexism. Probably a lot of lessons are done in English, which is bigotry. This poor guy, I mean, where would a guy like this be able to satisfy his sexual urges? Maybe that'll, just like bathrooms, right? I mean, after all, Correas Salamanca and Reyes Lopez, they could actually shower with 11-year-old girls if they decided that they were actually transgender, right?
According to this, yeah.
With the twisted calculus of progressive leftists, who should we really feel sorry for here? The 11-year-old girls who we're fond of telling just get over it? Or the actual poor victims here of American hate? I mean, we let them into this country illegally. We put them in school, give them driver's license and all sorts of benefits. They turn around and rape those guys. We clearly did not provide prostitution tickets, right? Maybe if we had vouchers for visiting prostitutions, if we were more sympathetic to the sexual needs of the Salamanca family, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Those poor girls wouldn't have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
That's true. Well, we don't have any information about Lopez's immigration status, so we can't quite say if he's an illegal alien or not, but he is accused of luring a different 11-year-old girl to an apartment and raping her. He recently arrived from Honduras, and this was just a few years ago, so clearly he needed to be in the high schools now. I'm not quite sure why we have 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds in the high school, but it's probably because in Maryland where they are, it's a sanctuary county.
It's a sanctuary county.
So that means they can just...
So he came initially during a wave of Central American immigration crossing the border. He was an unaccompanied alien child. Not a child. No. He's an unaccompanied alien child who was... This is one of those ones that, if we put them in cages, I guess it would be... Joy Behar would blow a gasket, right?
How many... Gaskets does she have left? I have no idea.
Something's got to be keeping that old crone going.
That's
I don't know. This story, this is a horrible story.
Horrible. Yeah.
It's a horrible story for those little girls. I just ask you again, to what degree are liberal public institutions, primarily our libraries and our schools, putting kids in these little girls in particular in these kind of circumstances, all to be able to pat themselves on the back with their virtue signaling and talk about how woke they are? And I promise you, I wonder if Maryland's is going to actually comply with this ICE ruling. We wonder what exactly is going to happen. They're not going to. They're underage, right? 19 and 20, raping an 11-year-old girl. At some point, you got to ask yourself the question, when do feminists wake up and realize that progressivism is at war with feminism?
That's a good question. Well, just so everyone knows a little statistic here, according to the Office of Refugee Resettlement, over 70% of the unaccompanied alien children, and again, children in this case, are 15 or older. So they're not really even getting to be children, the 19, 20-year-olds. 70% and 70% of that then have been male.
Well, why don't we apply Obamacare dictates, make them children till they're 27?
There you go. Okay, well, we'll move on to another story that isn't any better, where we have a little 7-year-old boy named Solomon Perkins, and he goes to Tesoro de Valle Elementary School in Valencia, California, and it was Valentine's Day, or at least near Valentine's Day, and he had more than 20 Valentine's Day cards in his little backpack, but he was accused of actually having a gun in this backpack as well. Check out the video.
Did you bring a gun to school?
No.
Why were they saying that?
I don't know.
They checked his backpack and saw that he had over 20 or so Valentine's Day cards that he was going to give to his friends.
When a school administrator found no gun in the backpack, she called the Santa Clarita Valley Sheriff's Station to investigate. But Solomon's mother, Thea Marie Perkins, didn't get a call.
She didn't call one sheriff. She called, there were 6 sheriff's department officers that showed up.
So let me understand. They thought there was a gun in his. Is that a gun in your pot? Is that a gun in your bag, or you just happened to see me this Valentine's Day?
Yeah, there was.
Is that what this is?
A student went and accused of little Solomon of having the gun.
Right, and they looked,
and there was no gun,
and they called the cops. So this is what's happening in American public schools. Maybe I need to refresh what I just said before. It's not just the progressives or feminists. They're at war with children. Maybe we broaden this, right? Because do we really care what happens to feminists? No. All right, so let's change that here. The American progressive school systems are now at war with kids. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. I love that kid's attitude. He can't stop looking at his Valentines. He's got a. I'll bet you what happened. That little Casanova had 19 Valentines from girls, right? And he's flipping through them, right, like bubblegum cards, trying to figure out which of them fine 6-year-old ladies he could be dating next. And
he's 7.
He's smooth.
Going for the younger ladies.
When he was asked, right, did you have a gun? Why do you think they thought you had a gun? I don't know. He looked like a little 40-year-old man right there.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, the school's principal decided, hey, we want to quelch anything that may have agitated the parents. So he sent an email saying, as many of you may be aware, we've had law enforcement on campus today. All of our students are safe, and the school day is progressing as normal.
No, they're not safe. If you're calling the cops on kids who don't have guns, let me repeat that. If you're calling cops on kids who do not have guns, they're not safe.
And apparently, according to the mom in the video, the principal didn't even acknowledge that the accusation against her son was false. They just kind of left that out, oh no, everything's fine.
And where's Black Lives Matter, and why are they not going after the continual calling of cops? In fact, we've got another story that's even worse.
It is actually a story that we've reported on in the past, but now there's video to support it. So we talked about the story of 6-year-old Kaya Roll, who was handcuffed with zip ties. This was back in September at her school, Lucius and Emma Nixon Academy in Orlando, Florida. She basically had a temper tantrum. The cops were called, and she was taken away in these zip tie cuffs. And now the video was just released.
I don't want to go to the police car.
You don't want to?
No, please.
You have to.
No, please. Give me a second chance.
You gotta wait.
I don't want to. No.
In what universe is that acceptable? I mean, in what intellectual universe is that acceptable? The little girl was zip-tied as if she were lumber. And as she's being walked out to the car by the biggest police officer they apparently could find. No policewoman, no maternal 60-year-old desk sergeant. No. They find Dwayne Johnson to come and walk this kid out to the car. And the whole time she's crying, give me a second chance.
Well, and there's a lot of things to look at in that video, too. Dennis Turner is the police officer, the officer who made the arrest, and he was fired just days later. But if you look, you have to look really close at the video. Right when they're walking out of the office, there's a school. The school office has a sign, and it says, "You are our greatest adventure." And then they kick the kid right out of it.
Gee, Mommy, guess what I learned how today? How to make my fingerprints and stand in a line.
And then when you see little Kaya having to get into the car, the cop asked, does she need a booster to get in? If you need a booster to get into a police car, and do they even have the legal car seats in there? No, probably not. Why are you arresting a 6-year-old? Like, hearing her cry, I know what that cry sounds like now, having had, and I can't even with it.
So we started with a situation where you've got literally adult illegal aliens in high schools who are raping kids, and now you got a 7-year-old boy who, when they don't find a gun on him, the cops are called anyway, and then you have this.
And they took her away. And this was back after Kaya was placed in a police SUV to be taken to the Juvenile Assessment Center. Basically, the mom, or was it the grandmother, had returned. No, the police officer. Sorry, the police officer returned to the school's office and was talking to the administrators about the situation. And he said, the people in the office were concerned about little Kaya, and he kind of downplayed it and said, it's not like what you think. The juvenile detention centers, they're not like what you think. And he told them that he had arrested 6,000 people in his career, and the youngest to that point was 7 years old. And then the employees said, hey, Kaya's only 6, not 8, like he thought. And he's like, well, now she has broken the record. As if it's a point of pride.
Look, the child threw her tantrum. She was sent to the office, apparently. A company cop who works for the school was there.
Yeah, and remember, this is in Florida, so they have the law where they basically, every kid then will just go to the detention center or the juvenile detention center, and then it gets determined as to what happens. So we've had multiple stories.
We did,
about
I
this
remember.
type of
And what
stuff.
triggers a trip to the detention center? Any kid who gets sent to the principal's office?
That's the good question. Is exactly where it is. I think, is that called the Baker Law? I think it's the Baker Law.
That was the Baker Law. Yeah.
So that's where does it actually come into play and how they enforce it? Because basically what happened is that Kaya was said to have had a temper tantrum. She didn't sleep well the night before.
Right.
And so she may have kicked the...
Well, she also has some issues.
Yeah.
Right? So she has some documented issues on record with the school. So again, I mean, where is any common sense with this? Although I would simply say, sue mom and dad, because you show that video to any jury that has one mother on it, and you're going to win your case. Yep. And not only, if I may repeat the theme of this episode, not only are the progressives waging war against children, the people who on every level, whether they're the police adjutants, whether they're the administration, whether they're teachers in the classroom, waging war on children in the public schools, we also have a situation where public schools, now there's an article that was written that kind of makes the same point. Public schools are teaching our children to hate America. Again, kind of a Captain Obvious statement, but it shocks me how many moms and dads don't believe this. I mean, how many times have you heard it? How many times have I heard it? No, Dr. Pesta, I know you're right. The public schools are a disaster, but my teachers really care about my kids. Mm-hmm. This would never happen in my school. As if somehow the teachers can magically walk into Barnes and Nobles and pick their own textbooks as opposed to the ones that are being assigned in the classroom. The textbooks that take the Hate America rant, right? So public schools are teaching our children to hate America. Quote, today we talk as if it's all about college and career readiness, education scholar Michael Petrilli told the Post. But going back to the 1780s, the argument in favor of having public education at all has been first and foremost to develop democratic citizens. Now, I got to stop here. This guy, Michael J. Petrilli, has just written a book. He's gotten about 15 scholars together, including some important people like Bennett, the former Secretary of Education, writing essays about how to fix this. Here's my problem, and I don't know that you're going to hear this from anybody else. Michael J. Petrilli is the president of the Fordham Institute, who went around the country 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, arguing that Common Core was good for kids. The very Common Core system that accelerated and exacerbated this I hate America worldview, this guy was peddling. He came to Wisconsin. I remember when Sandy Stotsky was interviewing here and she was giving her spiel, Petrilli was flown in by the pro-Common Core people, and he was lecturing everybody that the conservatives are all wrong about this. Common Core is beneficial. Kids are going to get higher levels of education. And here we are 8 to 10 years later. He writes a book criticizing the whole thing and seems to come off, no one's pointing out the inordinate role. This guy was a personal pain in every one of our butts who was trying to warn people about this. This guy pretending to be from a conservative think tank, Fordham, pretending to be an expert on education, telling us how you guys don't know what you're talking about. I'm a conservative. Fordham's conservative. This is going to be so wonderful for your kids. Now he's written a book about how crappy it all is, and it needs to be pointed out that the wanted page, dead or alive, intellectually, not literally, his picture would be one of the first. He'd be with Jeb Bush, and pretty much Michael Petrilli. You can put those two together, the conservative faces of Common Core.
You've had many a run-in with Mr. Michael
Oh,
here.
jeez.
Well,
what a talking empty suit.
Well, and hopefully he's learned his ways now, the error of his ways, and he's written this book. It's called How to Educate an American, The Conservative Vision for Tomorrow's Schools. Templeton Press is putting it out. So it's Petrilli and co-editor Chester E. Finn Jr., and they have essays from 20 prominent conservative thinkers. I take it they didn't consult you.
No, but I'm not prominent.
Well,
In any other way but wait. You wouldn't call me prominent, but I would say simply that I would not have accepted the opportunity to. I would have written how conservative sellouts, if he'd asked me to write an essay for his book, it would have been how conservative sellouts like Jeb Bush and Michael J. Petrilli sold American kids down the road and now live to gripe about it.
well, we'll have to see if this book somehow magically replaces anything having to do with Howard Zinn. I kind of doubt it.
No, it's not.
We'll see. Well, that's going to do it for the first Monday in March. Oh, the madness we have. If you like the show, please help us keep others educated by sharing this episode with your family and friends on all of the platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Parler, etc., etc.
And if you're a fan of the show and have a business, a business fan of the show, a prospering, contributing to society fan of the show with your own business, we can advertise for you. Consider advertising with us. Visit freedomproject.com/advertise. That's freedomproject.com/advertise to learn more. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay non-hypocritical, my friends.